Hey guys, welcome back to Mac Kiteboarding. I'm Tucker.
And I'm Jeff.
And today we're going to talk to you about how to choose a size for your first Parawing. And then also what that might look like as you progress more into the sport, get more experienced, how you might go about picking a Parawing for the session that you're about to go on. So we've been exploring this stuff now and really fighting our way through some of these choices, making the wrong choices so you guys can make the right ones here in the future. So this is based off our experience and customers' experience we've gotten feedback from as we've all explored this new territory and learned the tough lessons here. So buckle up.
Perfect. So let's start with, what are the ranges that Parawings come in?
Yeah, so who knows at this point? I mean, currently in the market, we have like 1.5 all the way up to 5.5 roughly is the top limit. There might be somebody with a 6 or 7 dual skin. I'm not quite sure. It's always constantly evolving. I think there's room to go there eventually, but yeah, primarily, really we're talking about 2.5 to 5.5 meter wings for beginner riders at least, and most average riders of average weight. That's going to kind of cover the gamut of almost any wind with those choices. So to go first and most simply, I think beginners, if you're learning the sport, how do you choose a Parawing size for that?
And we've seen, whether this is true or not, a lot of companies coming out of the gate with 3s and 4s,
yeah,
5s, but I'm seeing a lot of 3, 4s.
Yep. And
so
I
does
think
that mean
that's
something?
to address the fact that most early adopters are going to be more experienced riders, people that are going out in better quote unquote conditions. So they really want something, yeah, for that 18 to 30 kind of conditions that's so common at most locations. That's where things are, fun and performance oriented.
Because you usually have a wave or a downwind swell.
Yeah, and some wind.
To preface this a little bit.
But not hurricane wind, So average winds, for downwinding, that's kind of the typical stuff. It's not super light. It's not super crazy. And it's also an easy size to pick on because it's not huge. It's not very specific towards light wind. It's not super tiny and very specific towards crazy high wind. It's that middle ground that most people are going to do. So that's really where they're investing a lot of R&D time early in this cycle. And then everything kind of grows beyond that 3 to 4 meter range adaptively, depending on what they're doing there. So,
and given the right, which we've done another video on, that you're on the appropriate foil and board.
Yeah, we're going to assume you're on the right stuff.
Yep, you're on the right stuff there. And we're, to generalize maybe a little bit, we're talking people that weigh between like 150 and 200 then, or is that not a fair assumption of that 3-4 range?
Yeah, I think so.
Talk about that? I mean, we do talk about weight a lot and having the right gear, right? And how does that,
how
does that translate with Parawing,
It's a factor for sure. Yeah. Just like any other thing, your weight is going to determine, along with the wind, what kind of wing you're trying to learn on. I would say for somebody my size, about 95 kilos, I want to learn on a 4 to 5 meter. And that's a little bit limiting. It kind of sucks because Parawings are a little bit more limited for range and controllable, easy to learn kind of power.
That's a very good point.
So you're going to have to pick and choose your sessions or realize, okay, like I did, I had a 5.5 and I'm going out in 25 to 30. Like, you got to realize that's going to be a struggle. That's part of what's going to hold you back, and you're not going to learn as much because you're just dealing with that power. Or on the other side, if you're on a 4 and you're going out in 12 knots, it's too light to ride really. You can go out and fly it and taxi around and learn stuff, but you're not going to be getting on foil and doing anything there. So flying on the beach is a good option in that kind of a situation. But unless you're going to buy more than one wing, you are going to be kind of hunting an ideal session to really have a boost, a big step forward in progression. And obviously, anytime you can fly it, anytime you can be on the water, you're learning something. But to really get that magic clicking moment, you really want to be in proper conditions, not massive waves, not totally uncontrollable power, not totally underpowered. And maybe all this goes without saying, but it's important in this sport specifically to have, the right size for your power. So if you're in an area where you're like, man, we get 15 to 20, but not a lot over 20, I would say, you know, at my weight, you probably want a 5 or 5.5.
And you're at, I mean, you're cutting your weight right now.
Yeah, 95 kilos.
Yeah.
Fighting weight.
That's right.
Yeah, in terms of somebody your size, you know, I would say in those same conditions, you know, you could probably get away with a 4, and that way you'll gain a little bit of range on the top end. You know, you might not get out in 15, but you'll be out in that 17 to 23 kind of range.
Yeah.
And for you, having a 5 is just a little less appealing because you're going to get blown off it so much in those good conditions, right? For us here, we get a lot of that like 15 to 25 kind of wind. So that's sort of our window we're looking for. You know, for me, like a 5 and a 4 is a really good quiver for that kind of wind. Or for me in the fall and winter where we get a lot of 25 to 35, then like a 3 and a 4 would be a great quiver.
And those that have been in, you know, kiting for a while, you think of this kind of like in the kite world, the rail kites, the foil kites, you know, that are have a lot of power. You can usually go a size down.
Yeah.
Para, they do have a lot of punch for their size.
They do. I would say
but
they don't have a lot of power and grunt off the go. So it's not like a really grunty wing where you're going to be at a standstill and go, huh, and like pull yourself straight onto foil. They have
more apparent,
adequate power for their size, but yeah, once they get moving and building apparent wind, it compounds quickly. So you can get overpowered really quickly. So that's the thing you want to be careful of. If you're in gusty situations, you might be able to cheat down a little bit, but I wouldn't go out and go, you know, oh, it's 15 knots, you know. Rather than the 5, I'll grab the 4. It's like, no, I'm going to grab the 5 and make sure I have adequate power. It's still within that range. So I would say you want adequate power. You don't want to be undergunned as a beginner because you know, you're just going to be floundering, getting thrown around by the waves without much direction. So that's the hard part. You know, you got to be much more specific and intentional about what wing you're using.
So big picture.
For what session?
You may not have to buy all the sizes like you would with a kite, because I think, you know, I'm kind of stepping out here a little bit, but I think with this sport, you're generally going to pull this Parawing out, generally speaking, when there's winds up and there's some kind of swell to ride.
Typically, yeah. Or if you're learning, maybe not the case. You want to just get out there when it's calm.
But I think, you know, you would choose the wind. You know, if you're looking like, I don't think it's a sport where you need like all the sizes necessarily. You know, it's definitely something that I think is for more narrow in the focus of, you know, the para, you know, why people are so drawn to or seeing it is the potential of riding swell and not having anything in your hand, stashing it away. So generally speaking, in a lot of areas that have swell, you know, there's going to be some wind. You know, it's not going to be. Yeah,
you're picking out the ideal sessions, and that's kind of what we've been doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I still love to wing in light winds. You know, I still love to wing when it's really chaos out there.
I do too. So I have a lot of
crossing swell, and especially if I want to stay in the same spot, not downwind. The wing, you know, can be a better, more controllable tool for that. But yeah, in those sessions where it's side shore and just rolling downwind for miles and the wind is consistent, it's amazing for that. If you want to make laps in your same location and just make some nice long surfy runs without anything in your hands, obviously it's perfect for that. But yeah, I'm not necessarily reaching for the Parawing when it's blowing 10 to 12. Maybe one day, you know, as the sport progresses, as the designs progress, I think there's room for that. But yeah, I think the core range, I think, is what most people are looking for, especially since most people aren't pro level yet. They can't cheat out the efficiency in the super light days, and they're not ready to go out in 50 knots with triple overhead crazy waves and die. You know, you're more in this range.
It's more focus is kind of what I was trying to have with that
so I think that's where
you don't need
the weight matters a lot, right?
You don't need the whole quiver. I think as you're coming from, most people that are getting into Parawing right now are coming from winging background. They may have 3 or 4 wings.
They are downwind.
Yeah, they rode or downwind. They ride in a lot of conditions because that's the only way you get better. You got to get on the water and ride. And now they're seeing the potential of, you know, riding without things holding onto a big wing or flagging it out for a while. So I do think, you know, we're new. This is new. We're in the infancy, you know, the early stages of the sport.
Right.
But I do think it's going to be a little bit more focused in the fact that you don't necessarily have to have a full quiver. And that's why, you know, I guess we're kind of trying to help here a little bit with
look at your conditions over the course of the year. Decide, you know, you want to ride more often, you know, in your everyday type conditions? Are you really waiting for that, you know, 10 times a year, amazing kind of conditions, then aim it at that? But yeah, I think the smart move for most people is to get that average good condition for those kinds of riding. And then lastly, I think, you know, outside of weight, really your intended riding style ultimately. So if you're a downwind person, maybe you're a downwind paddleboarder already, or you're just somebody that has access and does a lot of downwinders, I would say you can size your quiver up, especially if you intend on riding smaller boards and foils, especially if you have good waves. A lot of times you're going to want a smaller board and foil to really level up your performance and be able to control the power of those big waves. And to do that, you need bigger wings. So you might not be there as a beginner. I wouldn't send you out, you know, on a small board and foil with a huge sail as a beginner and say go, you know, but maybe you're going to hunt some lighter wind sessions as you progress through those basic steps. And then ultimately, you know, you're kind of set up as you progress into that intermediate advanced stage into the type of riding you're wanting to do. On the flip side of that, I would say if you're like, you know, us, a lot of times you're riding at the same location. We don't do quite as many downwinders as we do just riding at our local spots and picking out a good wave spot and kind of making laps there. That's where, you know, the wind range is more compressed because you need to ride upwind. You can't be overpowered. And in that situation, I would say you're going to hedge your bets towards the smaller side of the spectrum on the wings. And you might need a little bit more wind to start, or a bigger board to start, or you might need to hunt those slightly windier spots and flatter water on an inland lake or something to get the basics down. But then you're going to be well set up for what you ultimately want to do. So for you, you know, we're in the spring here. I would put you on a 4 meter to learn, or a 3 and a 4 quiver. And then, you know, it's kind of like, man, we don't get that many days in the spring that are 3 to 4 meter conditions. It's like, that's just kind of the way it is, unless you want to buy a 5 that, you know, in addition, but ultimately you will want a 4-3 quiver.
No.
So I think that's the message. You know, if you're upwind and then, you know, making laps kind of a rider, then, you know, you want to be on the smaller side to make sure you can ride upwind. If you're doing downwinders, as I mentioned before, you know, you can go out completely lit and you're just putting that thing out there, getting on foil, getting on your feet, and then packing it away. And you're not taking it out unless you absolutely need to. And you can deal with that overpowered situation when you're riding downwind fairly easily, but don't plan on riding that 5 meter upwind in 30 knots because it's a losing plan.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the correlation with winging. You know,
yeah.
As I got better at winging, you know, it's really about the foil,
right,
and what I'm riding. So I'd rather size down on my foil and maybe size up a little bit on my wing, you know, for those riding those big swells.
Yeah, you're picking your foil based on the swell.
So there's some similarities. The thought process of the size of your Parawing, that, you know, I think you did a nice job explaining that. If you're staying local, you know, you're going to want to have something you can manage and be able to jet upwind with. Whereas if you're just heading down, you want something that when you get in a pinch and when you're down, pop you right up and then stash it away. It's not like you're constantly riding.
Yeah, last thing you want in a downwinder, right, is to go out undergunned.
Yeah, with a small 3
meter. You get halfway
meter,
through a 20-mile downwinder and you go,
can't even get
oh
up.
crap, the conditions came down 2 or 3 knots and now I can't get on foil. This sucks. Yeah. You'd rather be a little lit. And if you have a little bit too much power, you can deal with that, but at least you're still getting on foil.
Yeah. So, yeah, I hope maybe that helps a little bit, just our discussion about, you know, the ranges we have now, what you know, you should pick as you're getting into the sport, knowing that as you progress, you know, where are you predominantly going to be using this Parawing? What's the wind like? What's the conditions like? Because that's what you're really building for, building towards, not buying a Parawing that you're just going to learn on, just stash away, never using it.
Yeah, and stay tuned because we got a lot of reviews coming up, and a lot of these talking points are going to be reoccurring themes. Mm-hmm. What is the range of the wind? What is the range of the wing? How does it go upwind? What's the bar pressure like? You know, what's it packed down like? These are all different
aspects,
criteria for different styles of riding and different mentalities going into a session. So while this wing over here might be best for you as, you know, a person that's riding locally, this wing over here is going to be better for the person that's doing 50-mile downwinders. And then there's a whole spectrum in between. So a lot of the wings we're testing, they're all really fantastic. They're all really impressive as an early sport gear.
There are
But
differences though.
where you're going to separate, what the right choice is for you is in those fine details where it can really help you in certain aspects of riding styles.
Yeah.
So,
And we've been able to experience that not on the water as much yet, but on the land, where we've done some back-to-back flying with similar sizes, different brands, and the very things you're bringing up are true. The bar pressure, how it feels, the punch, how it maneuvers, where you put your hand on there. And so a lot of this will be variables that we'll dig into more as we get in the water and get more progress in sport.
Yeah, and a lot of the early discussion is focused on a lot of like the really, noteworthy but not significant details, like, are your bridles colored? Like, yes or no. That can, be nice, but it's not going to make or break a session. It's not.
How much you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It is helpful.
The
when you
weight
know what
of
you're
the
doing.
total wing is a consideration, but it's not going to make or break a session. But the range, the upwind ability, the application of a wing to a particular riding style can really help you level up your experience and really, again, maybe not make or break a session, but could make or break your quiver choices and how that all works together. You can, really have 2 wings you're enjoying rather than 3, or just be better suited to the type of riding you're doing. So I think that's really where the rubber will meet the road.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really seen any products I really significantly disliked and said, like, that was just a really bad design. Not yet anyway.
No.
But a lot of them are good. They're just different.
Yep. And I think be looking forward to hear from you guys as well too, as you're learning, as you call in here at the shop and we talk about things, because by no means do I feel that I'm an expert in parawinging yet. I just think I'm sharing from our perspective as we learn, as we've engaged with this new sport, things that we're learning and can apply to kind of help as we help you as you get in the sport. And
Yeah, it's
some
exciting
decisions.
times, man. It's like
It is.
winning all over again.
It is. It's
You got to
awesome.
get out there and figure it out, and I'm sure the gear will progress and get more specific to different types of performance as we go. But
Yeah.
right now, it's a whole world of opportunity. I think there's a lot of interest in it, and
it's
we're certainly enjoying it. We're having a blast.
I mean, there's
so.
some simplicity to it. There's some freeness to it. And I think that's the theme too, as you're looking at gear. I think you can get a little more narrowed maybe with this, depending on your local ride place and the conditions. But I could see myself down the road, I'd be picking certain days to para. And so that would kind of limit, the sizes that I would need. Maybe like you had said, get away with one size around here for most of our conditions would be a 4 meter probably. Would cover me for most of what I'd want to do.
Yeah, and then you can
in
adapt,
sport.
right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, if it's over, 23 or 24 and you only got a 4, but you want a parawing, well,
Size
time to
down.
organize a downwinder.
Yep. Size
down your foil.
That's right.
And
So
go to have a rip.
yeah. So, hey, hope you found this a little bit helpful as we're in our journey of learning and engaging with all the new products and getting on the water, and more to come for sure. So it's been Jeff and Tucker from MACkite. Give us a ring, send us an email, send us a chat. I'm more than happy to hear your stories, hear what you're learning, as we're on this journey together.